Hi guys, thank you for joining me. Welcome back to Missing the Missing. My name is Catherine, and in today's episode we're going to be discussing the disappearance of Esra Uyrun. Esra Uyrun was born on the 1st of March 1973 into a small but close-knit family. She is the youngest of 3 siblings, with an older brother and an older sister called Berna. Berna was 7 years older than Esra and took on the role of second mother to her, resulting in the two becoming incredibly close. Esra is being described as being of Turkish descent, and though she can speak, read and write in Turkish, she is described as being British and speaking with a British accent. Esra's partner Oscar is also of Turkish descent, and the two married in 2003 and lived together in London for a period of time before both moved over to Clondalkin in Dublin, Ireland. And in 2007, after the pair got jobs in sportingbet.com, the two conceived and birthed a young son called Emin, and due to childcare issues, Esra stopped working. Now, Esra did fill her days with community activities and charity work. She attended groups and set up a Facebook page in which she could promote these works and groups. She was well known both in her local area and in the local Irish-Turkish community. But despite this, it was noted that Esra had been feeling down and lonely in the Clondalkin area, resulting from the death of her father a few months prior in 2010 and the distance between herself and her family at this challenging time. Esra is described as being 161 centimetres or 5'3", though I did note one or two sources claim it was 5'5", but in every appeal made by the Garda and the family, she is described as being 5'3". She has green eyes and dark hair, but she does have blonde highlights. When she was last seen, she was wearing black leggings and a dark top and was described as wearing white Nike trainers. However, I did note in one source that these trainers were later found in the home, and so she couldn't have been wearing them as they'd thought. But every year since the disappearance, the Garda have reissued an appeal, and this same description is included there, so I'm going to include it and assume that it is correct. Esra is also described as being a devoted mother, sister, wife and friend. Esra had an interest in art and in fashion design, and at the time of her disappearance in 2011, she was actively involved in setting up a community fashion show, as well as making future plans with family members, including an upcoming visit by her mother and mother-in-law. On the run-up to her disappearance, Esra was not noted to have been acting out of the ordinary. There were no changes noted to her behaviour or routine. And her sister, Berna, did recall the last time she spoke with Esra just a couple of days prior to her disappearance. She was excited regards the upcoming family visit, which she had been planning for quite some time and had already purchased the tickets for. She discussed a shopping list and a number of spices that her mother was to bring over, Turkish spices that could not be found in the local area. She was also known at the time to have had a discussion with a neighbour regards what school their children would be going to, and the neighbour recalled nothing out of the ordinary. Esra's look can change quite dramatically, as you can see from these pictures, and as such the family have requested that updated photographs are used, one of which is available on request from press office at garda.ie. I will include that information in the description box below. Esra was 37 years old at the time of her disappearance and lived with her husband Oscar and 2-year-old son Emin in Ronanstown Garda, Clondalkin, Dublin. On Wednesday the 23rd of February 2011, it was a typical half-term day in the area. There was an imminent general election due, but outside of this there was nothing out of the ordinary. Esra and her husband were noted to have awoken at around about 7 o'clock that morning, with Oscar noting nothing out of the ordinary with Esra's mood or behaviour as she prepared to leave the house. A neighbour reported seeing her put her bin outside at about 5 or 10 past 7, and this is the last confirmed sighting of Esra outside of family. It was customary for Oscar to use the family's vehicle. They had only one car at the time, to go to work each morning. However, that morning in particular, Esra convinced Oscar that she needed to use the vehicle to go to the local shops in Neilstown for milk, and would be just a few minutes, and would return the vehicle in time for Oscar to leave for work that morning. She left the house in the grey Renault Twingo vehicle, registration number 08D 23067 at 7:15 or 7:20 that morning. Oscar reports Esra missing to the police later on that morning when she fails to return home to look after their son and for him to take the vehicle to work. The missing persons report was filed very quickly, and so initial response was fast. Police investigation revealed at about 6:55 or 8 a.m. her vehicle is captured for the first time on CCTV at the Power City roundabout, which is very close to her home, and ordinarily this should only have taken 5 minutes to get there directly from Esra's home. So already there's a significant chunk of unaccounted for time here, with approximately 40 minutes lapsed between leaving home and this first sighting. Unfortunately, it can't be seen on the CCTV footage who was driving the vehicle at this time. At about 8:30 to 8:40, depending on which sources you read, the car is then seen to enter and leave a car park at the Star Amusements on the Bray seafront in County Wicklow, where it would later be found, before it suddenly pulled out and nearly collided with a silver Skoda Octavia when it turned right from Covenant Avenue into Strand Road. The driver of this Skoda Octavia has never been identified, and to this day the family appeal for the driver to come forward, as they may have seen who was driving Esra's vehicle at the time. 10 minutes later, Esra's vehicle then re-enters the same car park and parks in the only parking spot that is in the CCTV blind spot. Witnesses at the time claimed that the vehicle was driving in an erratic manner, and when Berna, Esra's sister, viewed the footage later, she said, quote, "The manner of driving in Esra's car was very aggressive, bumper to bumper," and she didn't feel that this was Esra driving the car. Further investigation revealed that around about this time, a female was seen walking from the vicinity near to where the vehicle was parked towards Bray, which is a nearby very steep hill, but they couldn't confirm whether or not this was Esra. They couldn't confirm or deny whether this was Esra. CCTV in the area also sees a female walking as described, who stops for a few seconds before continuing on towards Bray. She appears to be alone, and it can't be seen whether or not this was Esra. The officer in charge of the case suggests, quote, "The woman does not seem to be walking with purpose and looks as though they are contemplating something." The same camera does not pick up the same female coming back down the hill. However, despite early hope from the family that this could be Esra, Berna and her brother have since denied this and point out that it appears the female is walking a small dog, and they have spent hours analysing that footage and have come to the conclusion that it is not Esra. Oscar told the police that Esra did like to visit the Bray area, which was 30 kilometres away, and that the family had been there on a few trips in the past. And at 11 p.m. that same day, the grey Renault is located in situ by the Garda. A search of the car revealed Esra's handbag and purse inside the boot, which contained €60 in cash, credit cards and her driving licence. Berna, Esra's sister, noted that she had never seen Esra lock her purse in the boot of the vehicle. She found this very out of character. And a really, really sad development uncovered during the investigation was that just an hour prior to the vehicle being found, at 10 o'clock, cell site analysis showed that Esra's phone pinged for the very last time off a mast in Greystones, which is an area on Wicklow Mountain on the far side of Bray's Head from where the vehicle was found. The phone was never found. Between March and May 2011, there were multiple searches of the area conducted by ground rescue team, volunteers, fishermen. Equipment used in the search included boats and a chopper, diving equipment, abseilers and even a paraglider to search both land and sea in the area. However, unfortunately, no trace of Esra was found. there has been no activity on her bank accounts or Facebook page since the day she disappeared, and nothing relevant was found on her computer either. The family also engaged both the Turkish and British embassies for assistance, and appeals from the Garda family are ongoing for a considerable amount of time. Posters are distributed and put up. However, due to the imminent general election, family note that as quickly as they were being put up, they were being removed and replaced with those of political parties, which did make it incredibly difficult for the family to raise awareness to the public that Esra was missing in the early stages of the disappearance. The day after Esra's disappearance, her mother was due to arrive for a holiday that we've discussed was already pre-planned and for which Esra had already purchased the tickets. In March 2011, the Garda appeal again for further information in relation to Esra's disappearance. In February 2012, an interesting development occurred in the case. A set of Esra's car keys were found. I've read both that they were handed to Berna and also to one of Esra's nieces, but either way, one of the family had returned to the area to distribute posters, and after doing so in a particular fish and chip shop in the Neilstown area, which is very close to where Esra lived and where Esra was known to have been a regular customer, he ran after this family member and handed them a set of keys which did have a fob containing a photograph of Esra and her family, including her son Emin. Again, I've read two ways in which they were found. One claims that the employees stated they were left on the counter sometime in December before Christmas of 2011 and had subsequently been kept on a hook. However, I've also read that they had been handed in around about this time, but unfortunately at the time when the lead was uncovered, and its significance to Esra's disappearance was uncovered, there was no CCTV to identify any further leads to follow. It was known that Esra and Oscar had lost a set of keys about 6 months prior, but the family seemed adamant that these were not the same set of keys. Personally, I don't know why. I don't know if they were familiar with the specific set of keys that had been lost and maybe it had different fobs on them. I noticed that family mentioned because Esra was a regular in that particular shop, if these were the same set of keys, Esra would have been identified a lot sooner and the family would have been made aware. However, either way, as I've said, the family dispute that this is the same set of keys. The Garda, however, did confirm that the keys found fit into the vehicle, Esra's grey Renault, that was found in Bray Head. In February of 2014, the Garda reissued another appeal for information. In April 2014, Esra's disappearance was featured on an episode of The Missing. In this episode, Oscar, Berna and Esra's son Emin were featured, and when prompted or when asked about his mother's disappearance, Emin explained that, quote, "Mummy went to the shop by herself and she didn't know the way home and got lost somewhere," which is really sad. In March of 2015, Berna, Esra's sister, contacted the Garda featuring similarities, highlighting similarities between Esra's case and that of Elaine O'Hara from Bray, who had unfortunately been murdered, but it would appear that this lead led nowhere. On the 27th of March 2017, the Garda reappealed for more information relating to Esra's disappearance. In July of 2017, Berna asked the Garda to try and enhance the CCTV footage to see if the driver of the vehicle could be identified. On the 23rd of February 2018, on the 7th anniversary of Esra's disappearance, the Garda make a new appeal on social media in relation to her case, and it is claimed here that the CCTV could unfortunately not be enhanced enough to make out who was driving the vehicle. On the 25th of August 2018, Berna asks the Garda to consider Esra's case in respect of another recently identified murderer, a male known to have killed a young lady by the name of Justine Valdez. This individual was later shot in a police shootout, but Berna considered possible connections due to the proximity of the cases. Both happened in the Bray area, and what is to say that this individual hadn't done this previously and just hadn't been witnessed. On the 25th of February 2019, on the 8th anniversary of her disappearance, the Garda did reappeal for further information in relation to Esra's case. However, unfortunately, no further leads came from this. Esra's sister Berna has taken the lead in engaging with authorities and taking control of the investigation into what happened to her sister, and she notes in a number of places the toll it's taken on herself and her family. Quote, "I feel like we are going round in circles. We need some form of closure. Over the years, I've felt the stress of not getting a breakthrough, and at times I've felt close to having a breakdown, but I keep going. She will never give up trying to find her sister or what happened to her." Unfortunately, in 2017, Berna explains that their mother was diagnosed with cancer and is, quote, "literally holding on for news of Esra." That is just absolutely tragic, as if this tragedy wasn't enough for this family. Now they have to put up with something else of this nature. It's just terrible news. Berna goes on to quote, "Mum has gone through hell since Esra disappeared, and it's really taken a toll on her health. She cries all the time about Esra, but she gets excited when I go back over to Ireland. It gives her hope. But then when I come back, it's heartbreaking not to be able to give her good news. It would be a blessing for Mum to find out what happened to Esra." But every year, Berna still tries. She still goes back from where she lives in London from her family to Dublin to raise more awareness of Esra's disappearance, to try and find more answers, to engage with media, to keep the publicity going. She has made by this time over 30 trips back to Dublin in total. She puts up new posters all over the area, and she says, "No matter how many years it takes, I will keep returning to Ireland until we find out what happened to Esra." Quote, "Hope keeps me going. You know there's always a glimmer of hope, but as time goes by, I'm finding it harder and harder to believe I'll actually find her alive. But never say never. I'm not convinced she is dead without a body, but then again, I know my sister could not go this quiet for so long. I will not give up that dream of being reunited with her until I'm told otherwise." And that just goes to show that whilst the darker thoughts can creep in, and after so long, obviously, naturally, you would consider the possibilities that your loved one is no longer here or has come to harm. Without that closure, you will always have that hope, and at least here it is driving Berna, and I do hope that she gets some answers for the family very, very soon. But even the loved ones in these cases, they differ as to their opinions and beliefs as to what happened, and I think that depending on the situation, can also serve to make things more difficult for the family. For example, in this case in particular, Berna's friend Ilkner, who has made a lot of trips back with Berna to Dublin to try and find out what happened to Esra, she said that she feels Esra is still alive somewhere in the world, whereas Berna herself has said that she believes there is a 50-50 chance she is alive. Yet Esra's niece Ida, she believes her aunt is definitely dead. So those polar opposites, that must make discussion and the holding on to hope particularly difficult in these cases. But despite the varying beliefs, it's really nice to see that the family and friends are obviously pulling together and united in their cause to try and find out what happened to Esra. Things aren't helped when people tend to give deliberately false details or hoax calls to the family, which apparently the family have had a lot of throughout the years. Quote from Berna, "It is sad we get targeted sometimes with false hope. Yes, we want any lead, any shred of evidence, and I will follow up anything that's given to me. But please don't come forward with false information, because that hurts more and that builds our hopes up. And I come all this way and I go back again empty-handed, and it's not fair on us." And she makes a brilliant point. I've never understood people who commit hoaxes. It's just an absolute waste of resources, let alone the actual emotional impact on the family. And anybody involved in that case, it's just absolutely a despicable act. And she is appealing here, obviously, for people to think twice and just don't do that. There is no point, nothing to gain by it. And over the years, as developments in other cases have occurred, it obviously brings more pain and more confusion back to the family as to questions of what happened to Esra. We've already discussed in the timeline that in 2015, a young lady by the name of Elaine, she was murdered by an individual who was later found guilty of this. And similarities were noted by Berna between Elaine's case and Esra's case. However, the Garda presumably investigated and no links were found. In 2018, another male, again, as we've already mentioned, he was seen abducting a young lady by the name of Justine Valdez. He did go on to murder her and was later shot himself in a police shootout. Although this murderer was not known to have, or was not witnessed to have committed any other crimes, there is no telling whether or not he has done and just wasn't seen. Berna went on to say, quote, "My mum doesn't know about what's going on over there, and I wouldn't tell her because it would just distress her even more. It's obviously a concern for all of us, not just our family. I'm sure there are plenty of other families out there sitting and wondering, what if? It brings it all back. It has never left us, but when something like this happens, it just brings the pain back even more, to be honest. And that's got to be absolutely tragic. Every time somebody loses their life or somebody is found to have committed a terrible crime, it would make you wonder. I mean, you're so desperate for answers, you would explore every avenue, and there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. In fact, it's very smart to do so, but there is untelling amounts of despair that can bring to the family on top of an already tragic case. Even sadder developments have happened earlier in this case. On the 8th of March 2011, just a couple of weeks after Esra disappeared, Berna had cause to state on social media, quote, "Please do not believe all you read in the Turkish newspapers, especially the ones that have been published in Turkey, as I have spoken to nobody in Turkey, but they seem to have copied the story and added other bits to it like serial killer rubbish." And that's just, that again is just despicable. It's disgusting behaviour. It's like glamorising the story. I mean, is the story not already sad enough that somebody is missing and somebody is without his mother, somebody is without her son? That's just outrageous. But hopefully the British and Turkish embassies were able to offer some form of assistance in that. It must have just been even more traumatic. I mean, Berna, as we've mentioned, she was splitting her time between London and Dublin. She was holding down a full-time job and also had young children of her own to be raising at the time. So she is just such a stoic person, and she's done an absolutely fantastic job despite all of the downs in this case. So when it comes to theories in this case, as always, we have to discuss the possibility that maybe Esra left to start a new life of her own accord. Now, personally, I don't believe that this is anywhere near as popular an act that would warrant its status as a theory in a lot of these cases, but I suppose, you know, it does make sense to consider it. However, she did leave her cash behind, and I've mentioned in probably every episode up until now, if you are going to deliberately disappear, cash is an easy thing that's not traced. It's not like you're making a separate withdrawal from your bank account. You would probably use that means at your disposal, but it was left behind, and it was left behind in her boot, which was out of character for her. She was also known to be making plans for her mother and mother-in-law to visit the next day. The tickets had already been purchased. There was discussion of them bringing over specific Turkish spices that she could use. This just doesn't seem to be the actions of somebody who is intending on disappearing. Also, if she was intending on leaving to start anew, her son is described as being her absolute world, and she would never leave him behind. And I just think it's really an odd time of day or an odd situation to choose. It was quite clear that her husband needed that vehicle for work that morning, so her disappearance would not go unnoticed for long. And usually if you're going to try to make an escape, if you like, you would choose an opportunity where it would go unnoticed for a much more significant period of time. Another possibility, though, is Esra could have left of her own accord potentially to end her life. There is no suggestion that this is the case, with the exception of she had been noted to have been depressed and down, resulting from the loss of her father. However, this is a perfectly normal reaction, In fact, I think it would be very abnormal if you weren't affected by the loss of a parent that you had been close to. Potentially emotions may have run deeper though than we are aware of, that we don't know about. Nothing has been mentioned publicly about this, but we don't know if there were further stresses in her immediate family life, any marital troubles or any financial difficulties. This is all just speculation. We don't know anything about this, but this might add to a theory, a potential theory of her leaving to end her own life. She was an active lady. She had been working. She appeared to be very independent and social. And even though she was filling her days with tasks, it doesn't appear to have had full independence when it comes to things like there was one vehicle in the household and her husband had to use that for work. So that would have restricted and limited what she could do with her days. But again, as I've just mentioned, this is all speculation and there is absolutely nothing to suggest that this was in any way true. It's just another avenue to explore. Berna, her sister, stated that she's trawled through Bray Head and the footage of Esra. There's nothing been found, no trace of her outside of the vehicle, and there's nothing even to confirm that Esra herself drove that vehicle there or was indeed inside the vehicle at the time it was driven there. The family put absolutely no stock into the possibility whatsoever that she could have ended her own life, stating, quote, she had too much to live for. Berna also goes on to state that she'd spoken to her just days before, and we've already mentioned this conversation when it comes to the Turkish spices and the plans that had been made with her mother and mother-in-law. The Garda, however, they do believe that Esra did go that day to the area to take her own life. It is strange, though, that if she was going to do so, she took her phone with her when she left everything else inside the boot of her vehicle. Why would you need your phone with you if she didn't send anything from it that we're aware of? So if you were going to take your life, especially in that area, chances are if you leave everything else behind in your boot, you're going to leave your phone there as well. So still on the theory that she could have left her of her own accord, her husband Oscar, he did state later on that, quote, maybe she's run off with someone else. And he did move himself and his young son back to London a few months after Esra's disappearance, which did strike a lot of people as odd. Obviously his wife had gone missing under unknown circumstances. However, he did go on to explain that whilst he did not want to leave, he realised that if he became unwell or needed help, his family were not there to help. And that's a good point, you know. But I do suppose it should be considered, and I've got to be careful how I say this here, basically whether or not Oscar had anything to do with Esra's disappearance. Now, I will state straight away that this has never been a theory put out there by either the family or any friends, anybody who knew Esra or the Garda. So this is pure speculation, and I certainly would not want to mar an innocent man's life, especially when he's already been through the tragedy of losing his wife and the mother of his son. However, all we have is his word that Esra left in that vehicle that morning. She was seen by the neighbour at 5 or 10 past 7 in the morning, so she was known to be safe and well there and then. It's not impossible that something could have happened in that short time that morning, and maybe Oscar was the one driving the vehicle erratically, maybe trying to get back before work, maybe. We just don't know. One thing that I do just want to point out here is that personally I find it a little bit odd that when Emin, Esra's son, was asked about his interpretation of what had happened or his understanding about what had happened to his mum, he said that Esra had gone to the shop on her own. Now, it may be completely innocent. It may just be that, you know, children do things sometimes that as adults we attach more significance to than is really necessary. But I think that kind of sounds a bit to me like a prompted thing to say. And I obviously don't want to make any allegations here, but to me it did just strike me as really, really odd that a young child would choose to include that level of detail. To me personally, I would just expect a child to say that mummy went to the shop and she didn't know the way back and got lost. I wouldn't really feel like a child would feel the significance or the need to include the fact that mummy went alone unless somebody had potentially told them to say that. Again, though, that is just my take. and there's absolutely nothing to suggest that that is what happened in any way, shape or form. It's a whole minefield to consider there, and I don't really want to delve into it too much because I think we've got to default back to the family's opinions here. They knew Esra, they knew Oscar, they knew the relationship as far as it was displayed in front of them. So it's just something very, very briefly to touch on, but I don't want to dwell on that. But Berna maintains that, quote, whatever happened to Esra happened against her will. So that is the second umbrella theory here, that he came to harm under some form of foul play. I think we can probably rule out an accident. I mean, we have some footage of the vehicle. We don't know who was driving, but it was driving erratically. Berna believes that whatever happened to Esra happened in the short space of time between when she left the house that morning and when the vehicle was first captured on CCTV at the local roundabout. As we've mentioned, this drive should have only taken 5 minutes, yet there was about a half an hour or 40-minute gap, depending on which source you go with. And Berna said, quote, I'm not convinced she got out of the car or that she drove the car this far. There's always been suspicion in us that maybe something happened near to her home and her car was just dumped down there. Berna even theorises that Esra may have been abducted and thrown into the boot of her car, noting that it would have been, even though small, big enough to hide an adult body. She also notes that if this were the case, she might well have still had her purse in her hand, which could explain why it was later found in the vehicle. However, if this were the case, I'm pretty sure something would have been seen if Esra had been carried out of the boot, if it were in Bray that this was done. But there is possibility, I suppose, that she was removed from the boot at another place and then the vehicle was driven to Bray. We just don't know. There are just endless possibilities to what might have happened to Esra. We've already mentioned that the Garda are investigating a link between the murderer of Justine Valdez and Esra at the request of Berna. And Berna quotes, "It is distressing. Somebody saw this man take this woman, but then who says he hasn't done it before and hasn't been seen? And how long has he been doing it for? We just don't know." And she's got a very good point there. We don't know. Just because he was seen this once does not mean that this was the only time he had done this. So I think it's very worthy to investigate that, but the Garda did come back and advise that there was nothing to suggest a connection between the cases, but that obviously they would advise if anything was uncovered down the line. But even if this particular monster wasn't involved, there is nothing to say that somebody else of a similar nature might not have been involved. We did note similarities or Berna noted similarities in 2015 of the murder of Elaine O'Hara from Bray. Again, the Garda, supposedly, we think that they investigated this and there were no links found, but there could be any number of other individuals who might have been involved, who just haven't come to the forefront. We just don't know. I am personally just really, really confused as to what could have happened in that very, very short space of time between when she left her home and when the vehicle was later spotted on CCTV footage. I do personally believe that it was not Esra driving that vehicle. I'm not sure how somebody else came to be in her vehicle or where she went in that shorter space of time, but something did happen. I suppose there might be potential, and this has been suggested also by Berna over the years, that maybe Esra was overpowered outside of her home and bundled into her own car and driven off. But I mean, it was early in the morning, but we do know that her neighbour and her husband were up at that time, up and about, in fact. And if you take a look at this image of her home, presumably her vehicle would have been parked on this driveway right in front of that, what I presume is the living room window. I really think it appears to be a terraced house, that somebody would have heard something. There would have been some form of commotion, and, you know, chances are that the purse wouldn't have made it locked into the boot. It might have been the contents might have been sprawled out across the floor. We just don't know. Maybe she started driving and was she flagged down by somebody on the pretense of needing some form of help, or did she know somebody that she voluntarily pulled over for and something happened? We literally have hundreds of possibilities that could have happened, and sometimes that is even more difficult to investigate because there is nothing pointing to one theory above any other, really. I think the biggest thing that we need to look at here is who was driving her vehicle. I personally think that if we find out who was driving Ezra's vehicle, we will find out what happened to Esra. And I don't believe that they were one and the same person. I struggle with the possibility that Esra might have gone over to Bray to take her life. Although it is known that if somebody is going to do that, they would usually go to a place that is familiar to them, that brings them some form of comfort. And Oscar did note that Esra had liked Bray and had taken the family there on occasions prior. I think it's a very unusual time of day to do so. You know, it's 7 or 8 o'clock in the morning. I don't know, it just strikes me as really, really very, very odd. But I'm not going to go into any more theories here because as I've mentioned a few times before, we could go on forever in this case, and I don't really think that that's going to be any more help. So in this section we usually focus on any rays of light. It's probably not the best terminology because in these cases it's very difficult. There are no rays of light, I suppose, but I tried to find something good that's come of it, and I really struggled in particular with this case. However, I do want to share one thing that I found with you. In 2013, an annual National Missing Persons Day was established in Ireland as an opportunity to each year remember missing people and their loved ones, and to raise awareness of their cases and the work done by volunteer agencies, charities and the Garda in order to try and bring them home. The first event was held on Wednesday, December 4th of 2013 at Farmley House in Dublin to mark that special occasion. The theme of the inaugural event is Forget Me Not, which has its origins in a project by transition students of Davis College, County Cork, who were named Young Social Innovators of the year 2012. Esra was one of the people to be honoured on this occasion, and it has continued each year from that point, with just last year the releasing of doves to mark the disappearance of a lot of these long-term missing people. Dermot Connaughton, I think that's how you pronounce it, of Missing Irish Support Services said, quote, "It will be the first ever National Day for the Missing, and it's a fantastic thing for the families. Many people have been working behind the scenes for such a day, and it will be warmly welcomed." And it was, and it's really nice to see that it's been such a success since then. So, once again, Esra is described as being a British woman of Turkish descent. She is 161 centimetres or 5 foot 3 inches tall, with green eyes and dark hair with blonde highlights. When she was last seen, she was seen wearing black leggings and a dark top, and potentially white Nike trainers. As Esra's look could change quite drastically, the family are requesting that updated photographs are used in future appeals, one of which is available on request from pressoffice@garda.ie. So now I want to leave you with some words from Berna, Esra's sister, who has worked absolutely tirelessly to find answers in this case. Quote, "I've got to keep going. I'm baffled and the Garda are baffled too. I know somebody out there knows something and I beg them to come forward." Berna is also appealing for the motorist that was driving the silver Skoda Octavia, which was nearly involved in a collision with Esra's Renault vehicle on the day she disappeared, to come forward. This happened on the morning of the 23rd of February 2011, and Berna is adamant that this person may have seen who was driving Esra's vehicle at the time, and so may know answers that the family are desperately in need of, and which could help to solve this case. The contact details that you can use to provide information are as follows. Ronanstown Garda Station, Ireland 0166 7700. Bray Garda Station, Ireland 0166 5300. The Garda Confidential line on Ireland 1800 666 111. Any Garda station of your choice. The Irish National Missing Persons line on Ireland 1800 911 999. Or you can also contact the family at missingesra@gmail.com. So thank you for joining me again for Missing the Missing episode number 4, featuring Esra's case. As we've mentioned, if you have any information, please pass it to those in a position to deal with it, either in the section just mentioned or in the video description down below. Thank you once again, and I look forward to seeing you in the next video. Bye!